Welcome to Harbor Time Strategy Talks. I'm your host, Colin Harbor. Harbor Time Strategy Talks is a podcast designed to explore a variety of business strategy topics and a place to hear practical tips for building and implementing sound business strategies. It is a production of Sea Harbor Services. You can find us at collinharbor.com. That is COLLINHARBOUR.com. I am happy to discuss business strategy with you any day, anytime. And now, it's Harbor Time. Hello, everyone, and welcome to Harbor Time Strategy Talks. This is your host, Colin Harbor, and today is September 22nd, 2020, and it's cooling off a little bit in Dallas from a weather standpoint, which I'm very thankful about. And there's really just too much in the world going on today for me to provide any updates. But I will say this, the Dallas Stars are in the Stanley Cup playoffs. The Dallas Cowboys had one of their greatest comebacks ever on Sunday. And, that's enough for Dallas people to be happy for a couple of days. One other thing, in case if you didn't know, there's this a Supreme Court brouhaha gearing up in DC, but we're not going to talk about that today. We'll leave that up to the pundits, if you will. So we're wrapping up this season over the next couple of weeks. When I started the podcast, I wanted to spend the first quarter providing good quality sound content and really trying to get into a groove. And hopefully we've been able to provide things that will help you and your business focus on your 2021 and 2022 strategy. Please don't forget to leave comments. Don't forget to shoot me any messages if you'd like, and provide feedback. Also, you can contribute financially to the show by clicking on the link. And as we begin to wrap up the first season over the next 8 days, I'll begin to focus on how we can take season 2 to the next level. And so any financial contributions on that are extremely helpful. So our topic today is one that's going to be very near and dear to my heart. And actually our guest, Launa, whom I'll introduce in a minute, very, very dear to her heart too. For the past 10 years, I've worked as a service provider, as a vendor in the mortgage servicing industry. My clients or the companies I work for, our clients were big banks, big financial institutions, the GSEs. So a lot of names, a lot of large companies. I've responded to 25 or 30 RFPs over the last few years. Vendor management assessments where we had to do technical assessments, financial assessments, operational assessments. And everything I did was from the vendor side. And interestingly, today our guest is going to talk about, at least initially, a little bit from the company side, the vendor management side. If you're a company that that utilizes vendors as part of your business strategy, and we'll talk about some of the advantages and disadvantages of that. But if you're one that uses that, our guest is going to provide some great information for you. As we were talking in preparation for the show, she also mentioned that she's getting a lot of requests too from vendors like the companies that I used to work for on how to set up their response strategy. How can they reply to RFPs? How can they shore up their operations? So we may get into some of that today as well. So let's go ahead and jump right into it. Our guest this week is Launa Lawhorn from the Impact Leadership Institute. Launa and I have known each other, believe it or not, for 20 years now, or almost 20 years. We were in the Baylor University Dallas Executive MBA program back in the early 2000s. I know that's hard to say sometimes. And we've only spoken a few times since then. But recently I noticed a lot of social media content from Launa and her business Impact Leadership Institute. So I'm going to go ahead and introduce Launa. Hello, Launa. How are you doing?
I'm doing great today. Thank you, Colin.
All right, well, great. Well, can you tell us, Lana, a little bit about yourself and the Impact Leadership Institute? What is the Impact Leadership Institute and what do you do?
Absolutely. The Impact Leadership Institute is a value based entity that provides two service offerings: end to end vendor management capabilities as a service and workforce strategies. These two services go hand in hand, and our value proposition statement is our ability to help companies maximize their contracts and improve relationships with their vendors and move those relationships from a vendor relationship to partners. As the leader of the Impact Leadership Institute, I identify myself as a conscious business leader, meaning that we provide the best service to help our clients solve their problems and elevate their business needs. We do the right thing. That's what the Institute does. We help our clients and we do it in the best way.
Okay, well, that's great. That is great to know. So you've been very active on, well, I say very active. You've been active on LinkedIn over the last few weeks. And for those who don't know and don't know you, I personally think they should follow you and pick up on some great vendor management life cycle tips. But you say in your posts, or at least the last few weeks in the intro to your series, you say, I am, and this is a quote, I am passionate about the vendor management lifecycle because when done right, businesses will reduce costs, minimize risk, and improve the quality of services received. So let's just start out with that question. What happens to, or with this question, what happens to a company if they don't have the right vendor management strategies in place?
I've been doing this on both sides for the past 20 plus years. And for the past 15 years, I've actually been looking at this vendor management lifecycle as a research project. And when companies do not have a framework or a structure in place to manage the performance outcomes, to minimize the risk, and to identify and understand the vendor spend, then it increases their costs. They receive degraded services and it increases risk in their environment. And so that's what our programs and that's where the passion comes from, because when it's done right, they save money, they're able to leverage and scale and build better relationships with the supplier, get more from the supplier relationship, and minimize risk. And so that's where the passion comes from. And those are the practices that we encourage all businesses to have around their vendor management life cycle.
Yeah, well, that's great, and that makes sense to me. I mean, particularly being on the other side of the equation over the last few years. You know, we it's interesting that you talk about that because a lot of the, as we went through these audits and these assessments from these large financial institutions back in the 2010, 2012, a lot of the vendors actually fell out. So, I think the vendor management strategies did help eliminate some of the risk for these financial institutions. But from a strategic standpoint, how can a business maximize their vendor management relationships?
By building a framework first. We've seen as we've gone in and did some assessments and studies with our clients to help them, is building a framework to understand their overall sourcing needs is critical. Some companies, when they need, or organizations, when they need a sourcing solution, they just impromptu go out and they get a solution and start to accumulate two or three vendors where they could really source all that work within one vendor, leverage the contract better for negotiations, and then be able to build a better relationship, getting all those sources from one vendor versus three vendors. So we work with them to look at their needs holistically, and then we work with them to help them understand the true needs from a people, a technology, or a process perspective, and look to leverage it within fewer vendors versus, more vendors.
Sure.
And one of the things that we do very well and has helped small and mid-sized markets in leveraging this area and significant savings is just looking at this bigger picture. And when they're looking at it in that way, they've received significant savings and they're able to move from having a vendor relationship to more of a partnership. And what that means is that supplier or that vendor not only provide people resources, they can leverage their technology resources if needed, but more importantly, they become a thought leader for them. They bring in new ideas and help the businesses pivot and become a little bit more disruptive in their industry faster.
Sure. That's great. So you talked about different size companies and vendor management and that. What size does a company need to be to have a dedicated vendor management group? I mean, it may be hard to quantify, but as businesses grow, businesses look how they're going to staff resources or partners, strategic partners, if you will. How big does a company need to be to have a dedicated vendor management group?
Now, the large companies, public companies, they all have some level of procurement or vendor management. Not to say that they do it well, but they have it.
Sure.
And the the key sweet spot for us is the small and mid market because they're the ones that are growing. And as they start to accumulate vendors, and I would say once they get up to three vendors in their organization, they need to have some type of vendor management strategy. Now, that may sound like a minimal number, but if you're taking three vendors and you're spending an average of $20,000 to $30,000 with those vendors, the accumulative spend is significant. And that's where it's key to make sure that you're getting the leverage and the value and looking at them more holistically. To do that, it's putting in governance and structure. And so this is kind of what I've done in big companies for many years. And when I moved out and started working with smaller companies and what I consider to be startups, that's where this need came about because once they have this framework, they can disrupt in their industry a lot faster. And we've seen the results of that already.
Well, that's awesome. That is good. So it is quantifiable then. It sounds like if you get up to three or so vendors, if you get up to $60,000 to $100,000 and $60,000 to $75,000 in spend, you need to start thinking about it. That's good. So then let's talk a little bit about the other side of the equation. I know I alluded to it earlier, and you and I have talked about it a little bit. I've spent 10 years trying to win large contracts, trying to keep large contracts, trying to prevent companies from utilizing different vendors or adding vendors in my industry. And the companies I have worked for were pretty good as far as their financial situation, operational situation, technology and security situation, and those types of things. But it's been a fun ride. I know again that your folks has been on the corporate side of things, but what if someone wants to become a vendor for XYZ, TXU Energy, I'm just making up a company. If somebody wants to become a vendor for a large corporation or even become a vendor for a medium-sized business or small business, what are some things that they should be doing to firm up their finances, technology, operations, reputation, and other things that might help them? It sounds like you might be eventually putting out some content related to that. So I don't want to steal the thunder there, but maybe just a precursor to that, a little bit of information.
Sure. And the Impact Leadership Institute falls right into this, as well as we're going out to get business. And what I have found, Colin, is one, to be an expert in what you have to offer. Because even the mid and large companies are now taking a little bit more risk with what I call startup and smaller companies coming into their environment to help them. They're more attracted to us than, in some cases, larger suppliers that's going to cost them more and have a lot more bureaucracy in their system,
Sure.
in their delivery system. And then network, build relationships and become a part of communities, because a lot of communities are coming about that's really building capacity within each other. So it's not just about establishing a relationship with the procurement and the supplier diversity or supplier teams within the companies. It's also about us partnering as companies to kind of build capacity to take forward. So 50% of the pie versus 100%, sometimes just to get your foot in the door, that's a viable strategy. And then once you're in the door, you can branch off to provide services to other entities or other company or other organizations within that company.
Sure.
And lastly, make it easy for companies to do business with you. As smaller companies, they have a sense of risk that we have to solve for to really get in the door. And so reduce the risk factors. And with some things that you have seen in the best practice feed is, do a proof of concept or do something that reduces the risk, telling them that, if this doesn't work in the 90 days, that they get some level of compensation back. And that's how I got in many doors. They said, we don't know you. We haven't done business with you. I said, if you're not satisfied with my service and I haven't yielded the results that we agree you should get from this engagement, I'll give you part of your money back. I've never had to do that. And from that type of position, you get hundreds of referrals,
Yeah.
because people want to do business that they know, that they trust, and they know is going to help them solve for whatever problem that they have. So that's my recommendation about getting in. And once you want to get in before the solution go to RFP ideally, but if you're responding to an RFP, get the help that you need to make sure that your proposal is top notch and excellent and solving for the problem and answering the questions and following all the instructions that is in the RFP. That's very critical. A lot of companies get eliminated up front because they just have not responded in the way that was outlined as a requirement.
Sure. Yeah, that's an interesting thing. One, just as an FYI, but I'm working with a consulting firm now. We've been hired to respond to some RFPs on for some other clients. So just looking at the details and making sure that you're addressing all those is key. So that concept of, hey, if I don't do the right job, I'll give you your money back, or I'll give you some of your money back. I bet that's a great tip. I've frankly, I've never thought of that, but one of our companies we always wanted to do champion challengers, right? If we could get in and against an incumbent vendor, but that is an interesting concept. Hey, if I don't do my job, I'll give you part of your money back. That's good. I'm gonna take that one. And try that sometime. So what's next then, Launa, and on social media? I noticed on the recent post, or at least the last one that I read, that you said this is the last step for that particular series. So any new content coming down the pipe?
We talked earlier where the Impact Leadership Institute, from the business uh, series that we did, we're getting a lot of requests from vendors to say, how can we do our proposals better? How can we position ourselves better as the market is changing and companies' needs are changing? So you'll see another series coming out shortly on best practices, industry standards, and tips for vendors that are wanting to get into companies. I would just encourage your audience to connect with me and follow me on LinkedIn, and
Sure.
they'll be exposed to some of those tips coming out. And we're also working on a forum, and this is something that's going to be very powerful for both sides. It's called a Partner Summit Mastermind, and we're bringing together a small group, which will be business owners and suppliers, and have a discussion around their challenges, their needs, and opportunities. And this group will be a very small group of no more than 10, and
Mhm.
probably 60-40, 60 business owners and 40% with suppliers. We're looking to have these partnership and these engagements to organically build a community where the work can be done, and build that trust and be able to build relationships so that those business owners have a resource to go right to get their sourcing needs versus going through the expense of an RFP. And it is very expensive to execute RFPs both on the client side and the supplier side. And
Yeah.
so we're trying to help them streamline that process by putting together this forum and this summit.
Sure. Well, that's great. I'm going to keep an eye on that. That sounds awesome. So, if you don't mind, I know we've already talked about it a little bit. Um, Give us another commercial or kind of a wrap up commercial for Impact Leadership Institute. It sounds like you're doing great things. You're working with clients, helping them either create vendor strategies, vendor management strategies, and maybe even strategies to respond to vendor management protocols from a service provider standpoint. This forum sounds like it's going to be very exciting. Obviously, you've got content, but let's kind of wrap it up for everyone because I do encourage anybody who's listening to this. And when I push it out on LinkedIn, YouTube, and Twitter, I am going to, encourage them even more to follow you because I think it's been very helpful for me over the last few weeks. But let's have a commercial. If somebody wants to reach you for business purposes, how can they do so? So a little bit more information, and then how can they reach?
Absolutely. And by the way, this has been fantastic. So really appreciate your forum. Um, our mission at the Impact Leadership Institute, our commercial is we add value. That's what we do. And we do it through a conscious business model. I personally am a co-founder with Shiftco. And Shiftco is a business growth community for conscious entrepreneurs who want to both elevate their business and make a difference in the world. So that's our business model. When people do business with us, we're doing it in their best interest, and any benefit that come as a result of that is what we receive. We have helped our clients save thousands of dollars, increase the quality, the quantity, build lasting partnership with their suppliers. And just recently, we helped two small, what I call startup companies, win bids. So we helped on the vendor side. One got an award of 500K.
Hmm?
And that may be small in some environments, but for a company just up and coming, that was significant.
I
The
think just so you know, and that I think that is a significant contract for a lot of businesses, right? Particularly startups. But yeah,
Yes, I mean, for me, it would be significant.
sure.
And the other one that recently happened was, and this company is just a little bigger, a little bit more established, but they received a $1.2 million agreement that spans over 4 years. They already had resources that did their RFPs, but they weren't winning. So when they brought us in, my position with them was on a contingent basis. I said, if we help you win this deal, then you pay a percentage of what you receive. If they didn't win the deal, they wouldn't have paid anything.
Sure. That's a good way to
They
do it
won a
too.
$1.2 million deal over 4 years. And that was just bringing us in to look at what they were doing. We leveraged some of our proprietary templates and processes with them. And that's what we do. We come in and we provide vendor management as a service, utilizing best practices, templates, methodologies that's proven in the industry. And this is an untapped market for small and mid-sized business. Once they get this model under their belt and within their organization, it helps accelerate their ability to scale and grow. If it's done right. And that's what we do. We come in and we help them do it right. That's our commercial.
That's great. And, that is, even from a business owner myself and partnering with a couple of other firms, that is an interesting concept, the percentage, on the upside. Hey, if I can't provide the service that I say, I'll give you your money back, or you don't have to pay me, whatever, however you structure that. Those are a lot of good things. And it may be hard for businesses to swallow, but that is a great strategy tip when we talk about business strategy, particularly for small businesses or sole practitioners. If you want to get your foot in the door, you may have to do a little bit of the grunt work, So
we have to be a lot more creative today in the way that we go after business, and it's more about relationships than anything. And so, as I have said many times, we're value based. If we don't provide value, we make sure that you get your money back, or we don't offer that anymore, because every time we go in, the value is there. But if you're an expert in what you do, if you can stand behind your products and services, it gives you the ability to be creative and put your contracts together in a way that reduces the risk for the client. And if you deliver based on that agreement, everything else is history, and more work comes as referrals from that. And that's the way that we decided to build our business model.
Oops, I was on mute there for a minute. Sure. Well, great. So I guess to wrap up the show for everyone, we've only got a couple more episodes left on Harbor Time Strategy Talks for this season. Then we'll take a few weeks off and focus on season 2. But I want to tell you again, if you want good content, meaningful content, value-based content, I would encourage you to follow Launa Lawhorn, and I guess I should say the Impact Leadership Institute on LinkedIn, and then look for whatever other methods, because I think you'll be very pleased with the content. You'll get tips. I think this episode today provided a tremendous amount of information. It was great getting caught up with Launa. Like I said, we haven't talked very much over the last 16 years since we graduated, but we were in a relatively intensive program together for a couple of years. We traveled the world together, as part of that program. So I really enjoyed having you on the show, Launa. I really enjoyed getting caught up, and I'm glad we could do this today. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Colin.
For everyone else, have a great day and a great rest of your week, and talk to you soon. Thanks.